Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to r/justnohoa, where an entitled HOA president claimed my 80-year-old property belongs to the HOA. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled Betrayal and Broken Bonds. I live in a bustling metropolis in the heart of France. My sister-in-law, Adele, 52, and her indolent husband, Laurent, 54, are perpetually penniless and incessantly grumble about their predicament. For over a decade, they've been approaching family members with heart-wrenching tales, anticipating their debts to be settled. Their familial obligations have already surpassed hundreds of thousands of euros. Adele is a massage therapist, while Laurent, due to his ethnicity and age, believes that he is exempt from job hunting, convinced he wouldn't secure employment regardless. Whenever questioned about their unemployment, Adele invariably responds that she suffers from spinal discomfort and Laurent has ailing knees, is above 50 and of African descent, rendering job prospects non-existent for them. This assertion is utterly false, as I was personally employed at a job placement agency during that period and proposed numerous suitable positions to him, which he declined to apply for, deeming the hourly wage of 18 euros insufficient. Considering this equated to a monthly full-time salary of 2,880 euros before taxes, he found no compelling reason to rise from the sofa. Well then, it is summertime and Adele's birthday is approaching. We gather for a family barbecue. Adele assembles us all and delivers a speech. She expresses her desire to purchase a vehicle and requests 7,000 euros for it, along with an additional 2.5k euros for a high-end electric massage chair. She assures us that the money will be repaid this time. We inquire about her need for a car and how she intends to cover the ongoing expenses such as maintenance, taxes, fuel, etc. and repairs without a stable income. Adele retorts, Laurent is Canadian and he dislikes using public transportation. He is accustomed to driving. Moreover, Laurent requires the car to visit his friends, as commuting by public transport is unbearable for him and he feels uncomfortable. When further pressed about how they plan to finance the vehicle beyond the initial purchase given their lack of money and employment, Adele becomes irritable and begins insulting us. She accuses us of being cruel to her, trying to put her down with our inquiries, implying that she is inferior to us, and reminds us that she had offered to repay the money. The confrontation concludes with Adele bursting into tears and rushing into the house. As I enter the house myself, instead of hearing Adele weeping as anticipated, I overhear her conversing on the phone with Laurent, who was absent from the barbecue. Adele complains to him, claiming that we are all tormenting her, patronizing her and belittling her. She returns to the garden with a self-satisfied grin, places her phone on speaker and holds it out to us. Laurent shouts, "Just watch it, I'm gonna mess you all up, you jerks. Talking trash about me behind my back and making my wife cry. I despise you all. You're all terrible and I'll teach you a lesson." Throughout this outburst, Adele stands there with a contented smile. Sometime later on Adele's birthday, we, the doormats we were back then, decide to fulfill her heart's desire for a car by gifting her a car-sharing package worth 90 euros. Naturally, no good deed goes unpunished, of course. We provide her with the 90 euro deposit which she can utilize. The account is in her name and only she is injured. We thoroughly explain the details to her and she comprehends and agrees to adhere to the contract. She also promises to cover the incurred costs from her account once the 90 euros have been exhausted. Everything appears to be in order. Of course, Adele lied and neglected to update the account info, allowing her deadbeat husband to drive the car. Within a few months, the bill amounted to 1,800 euros. Upon noticing this discrepancy in our account, I promptly revoked access to our account and confronted Adele. She ignores me, refusing to respond to calls, texts or emails. However, she complains to my husband, her brother, about me portraying me as mean and a nasty wife who begrudges them, the impoverished couple, their car. Adele laments, "I haven't slept for 3 nights because of your wife, dear brother. Demand her money back. It's outrageous." Laurent responds to my email a few weeks later, calling me a B-word and a witch, threatening to beat me up so that I finally shut up and stop nagging him and his wife about the money. He claims that I need help because I've gone crazy. He continues to threaten me, stating that I will soon get a few punches if I don't keep quiet. The situation escalates to the point where this aggressive jerk shows up outside our house, attempting to intercept and intimidate me into silence. Did I mention that this scumbag already has several charges and court cases for violent confrontations? I report him to the police only to face opposition from the rest of the family, who chastise me for messing with him. "Don't provoke the beast," they say. I'm told that I'm responsible for the entire fiasco and that my husband and I have enough money and should let the poor relatives have it. My mother-in-law even goes so far as to say that she would beg from the family so that we greedy people would get our money back and finally stop bothering everyone. Unsurprisingly, Adele and Lauren don't repay a single cent or offer any apologies, nothing. They engage in a full-throttle smear campaign against us. My husband's family rolls their eyes at me whenever I raise the subject, insisting that it's my own fault and that I overreacted with my complaint. They even tell me that my response was extremely over the top and that I am the villain. I face rebuke from the in-laws from every direction. The situation culminates a couple months later at my father-in-law's birthday party, where Adele and Lauren make a scene claiming they are mistreated and bullied within the family and that we would all soon see the consequences of our actions. Again, the infamous threats from my scumbag brother-in-law. Lauren attacks all the men in the family at this event, threatening to hit them and particularly trying to provoke my husband into a fight. My pathetic brother-in-law has no success with this. He is such a coward that he only pushes my other brother-in-law's wife to the floor because he doesn't dare to approach the men. What a loser. Meanwhile, Adele shouts at me, holding me personally responsible for destroying the family and leaving everything in shambles. She mockingly asks if I'm proud of my destructive work. Shortly after, Lauren storms up to me shouting that he would do anything to protect his family and will smash my face in. I call the police as soon as the police siren is heard and Lauren and Adele flee the scene. After 3 long years, we finally received the money back from my mother-in-law, who had condescendingly offered to go begging so that we would stop nagging about the money. She was grumbling, kicking and screaming, but we now have the stolen funds returned by her. She saved her grown-up, unreliable daughter's hide. Recently, my thieving sister-in-law came scratching at our door again, announcing that she had severe depression due to the way we had treated her. I wonder, could it be because of her lousy, lazy husband who is a burden on her and picks fights with everyone he encounters? Apparently, there was so much negativity emanating from me personally that she needed to go to a special clinic for treatment of her depression. I told her to get lost and share her sob stories with someone else. My husband also informed her that he no longer had time for her. And well, I can understand that the in-laws found it ridiculous and not worth mentioning that we had been robbed of 1,800 euros. Previously, Adele had stolen a staggering 18,000 euros from her own daughter, her college fund. When the daughter inquired about the money, Adele simply shrugged her shoulders and said, "I had bills to pay." I'm now completely no contact with the in-laws while my husband maintains very limited contact. I'm finally free from those pests. Unfortunately, I must admit that my husband's family, with the exception of him, is utter rubbish. They cover up intra-family thefts, tolerate verbal, physical and emotional violence, and engage in perpetrator-victim reversal. I will never sit at the same table with them again. Update to the story: the saga never ends. My mother-in-law recently passed away. Adele and Laurent attended the funeral, even though Laurent had previously expressed his dislike and contempt for my mother-in-law. Despite all the mourners, except Adele, requesting that he not come due to his lack of respect for the deceased person, he strutted into the cemetery chapel with his head held high and sat in the front row, which was reserved for blood relatives. Adele had the audacity to shout at the mourners and relatives who didn't want to see her husband that she was the firstborn of the deceased and therefore had privileges, including the right to bring her husband. She claimed to have the sole authority to decide how the funeral service should be conducted. I believe that deep down, Laurent considers himself to be the French version of a flamboyant pimp. His funeral attire consisted of a dark blue polyester pinstripe suit, not the elegant version but the mobster style, sunglasses, a medium blue fake fur Stetson hat, and a walking stick with a fake silver knob. Cheap and inappropriate pimp style to the fullest extent for a funeral. He probably needed it to stand out since he had been muzzled by the mourners for the occasion. The funeral itself was quiet except for the fact that Laurent did not even approach the grave and just sat there glaring at the mourners, demonstratively turning away from those who approached him and refusing to shake their outstretched hands. Honestly, why did he even bother to come? As the mourning party dispersed, a gathering was planned for the immediate family circle, excluding Laurent and Adele. Unfortunately, my deceased mother-in-law has an older sister who, despite being aware of the plans to invite only the closest family members, took it upon herself to invite invite all the guests present, whether family or not, in a completely unplanned and unsanctioned manner. Of course, Adele and Lauren felt invited. Free meals! Yay! Of course, lacking all decency, sensitivity and manners, Adele and her youngest daughter found it appropriate to berate my husband, Adele's brother, on the spot for not wanting Lauren at his mother's funeral. Mother and daughter were yelling like banshees in the middle of the street just 20 minutes after the funeral. The grave had not even been filled yet, demanding that my husband apologize immediately for disinviting Lauren. Lauren watched this spectacle with relish, enjoying the narcissistic supply he had been missing for so long. Adele and her daughter continued to move towards the location, yelling at my husband, calling him crazy for allowing his wife, me, to file a fake police report against her dear innocent husband and family man. Adele's 18-year-old daughter treated her uncle, my husband, who had just buried his mother, like a piece of garbage. She insulted him, flipped him off and called him crazy and out of his mind. Lauren watched his daughter with satisfaction and pleasure. This devil has achieved his goal. His poison now flows through the veins of his wife and daughter. The funeral was a wonderful day for him. 2 psychologists have identified Lauren as not only a malignant narcissist but also a sociopath. Additionally, I hold Adele partially responsible for the sudden death of my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law had lung cancer and therefore had difficulty breathing. 3 days before her passing, she had called Adele begging her to finally apologize to my husband and me for the stolen money so that peace could return to the family. Adele verbally attacked her mother so viciously that my other brother-in-law had to intervene. The mother began to hyperventilate so severely due to her daughter's vicious assault that an ambulance had to be called to resuscitate her. 2 days later, she was dead. And yeah, Ripe stars, honestly, Adele and her crazy husband are absolutely despicable. Have you ever dealt with such insane people in real life? Let me know in the comments. Either way, the next one is the title story and it starts like this. So I am one of those strange people whose heart races when they discuss history. Everything old, musty and dusty makes my pulse quicken. From reading historical accounts to collecting artifacts from the past, it's more than a hobby, but rather a lifestyle for me. That is why when a local historic mansion came on the market, I made it my mission to own it. The house in question was an 80-year-old estate of show-stopping stature. It was a gorgeous mansion on a manicured lawn. The original owner was the spinster daughter of a canned food tycoon and the sole heiress of an enormous fortune. She was known for her eccentricities. She commissioned a hedge maze and brought in rare lady slipper orchids to fill the flower beds. The first owner's over-the-top gilded age flair made the mansion exceptional. Even after she was gone, the mansion stood out as a one-of-a-kind home in a sea of small craftsman homes with average lawns. The town was cute and full of charm, but it had no other buildings that compared to my grand estate. In fact, my home was the oldest standing building in my section of town, predating all the surrounding neighborhoods by up to half a century. I like to think of the estate as my personal place. It was the ideal spot for holidays, events and gatherings, and after a few years of living there, my friends, family and community came to know my home as the spot for amazing, elegant parties. Everyone loved coming to my parties just to get a glimpse of the house, so I made it a point to throw an annual soiree at the start of every summer. I invited the whole town, that way everyone could see the mansion in all its glory and I could meet my neighbors. The party was always a blast and it always led me to new and interesting people. It was at one of these excellent get-togethers that I first met Hank Howard, the new president of the local homeowner association. He was introduced to me by an old friend from town and at first he seemed like a harmless busybody. Little did I realize that Hank and his HOA would come to haunt my nightmares. Our first interaction was cordial though. He told me how he moved to town about 6 months ago and immediately found his place on the local HOA board. He was a retired man with an overinflated ego, but I was a good host so I heard him out. Hank from the HOA said, "And since I began my tenure as HOA president, everyone has started towing the line. Trash cans are brought in on time, chipping paint is addressed quickly, and dues are paid on time." "That's amazing," I said, although I actually found him very boring and was desperately searching for a way out of the conversation. "But if you will excuse me, it looks like someone needs my help with appetizers. Nice meeting you though." I shook his hand and hurried away from his boring HOA jabber. By the end of the party, I had totally forgotten all about Hank and the association. I didn't give him another thought until a week later when he showed up on my doorstep. My son answered the door and let the HOA president in to wait in the foyer while he grabbed me. When my son told me the man from the HOA was there, I assumed he had been wowed by the mansion during the party and maybe wanted to rent it or something. It was a fairly common request for such a grand house, so I went to politely hear him out, but what he wanted was far more than just a rental. I welcomed him warmly, saying, "Hi, Hank, right?" "Yes, with all the commotion at your party, I'm surprised to remember," he said, shaking my hand. "I love hosting. That way I get to meet everyone and everyone gets a chance to see the property, right?" I said. "Funny you should mention the property. That's why I'm here," he said. I still smiled. I knew he was here about renting the garden or the hall for some big bash. "Oh?" I said. "Yes. Well," he paused, "it's rather unpleasant business, but I'm actually here to collect the debt." I was stunned. I just met this man and had only talked to him once. How could he think I was indebted to him? "A debt?" I asked. He frowned as if to show that he was getting no joy from this conversation, although I had a sinking suspicion that the exact opposite was true. "Sadly, it seems as though the owner of this property has not paid its association dues in, well, ever," he said. "The homeowner association dues?" "Well, that's because the mansion doesn't belong to the HOA," I said. "Please excuse me, but you're wrong. I'm a town records buff and I reviewed the records. This property is part of the HOA and it owes a ruinous amount of dues," he said, and this time I was sure I detected the hint of a smirk. I was losing my temper with this overinflated man quickly. "Records? You want records? Well, I will get you records." "Follow me," I said, gesturing for him to follow me to the library. In the library, I searched quickly and found exactly what I needed. It was a folder of maps of the property. There were dozens and each bore a different year since the mansion was built. I kept the maps because they told the history of the house. I never thought I would need them to save my finances, though. Hank, the HOA president, pored over the maps for a minute before declaring them irrelevant. "These prove nothing," he said. "They prove the mansion was here first," I exclaimed. He shrugged. "That's nothing. Look, I didn't want it to come to this, but if you don't pay, I will sue you for back dues," he said as he pressed a bill into my hands and walked back to the front door to leave. I stood in the library with my maps feeling absolutely gobsmacked. This pompous man had turned my whole world upside down and seemed to have no remorse. I wasn't the bitter type, but there was something about him that did not sit right with me. Nevertheless, I had to hope that he was bluffing. I figured maybe he thought he could shake me down, but after seeing my maps he probably went home and decided to give up. Unfortunately, I figured it wrong. Just a few days later, I received a summons informing me that Hank was suing me for an absurd amount of back dues. The lawsuit claimed that I owed an amount of dues that was almost greater than the property's value. It also alleged that the mansion had been part of the association for decades and I was responsible for all those years of retroactive dues. I was in a dual state of shock and fury. I did not know what to do, so I did the only thing I could think of and I called my lawyer friend. They agreed to take on the case and said that they would look everything over and then get back to me. They called me that afternoon. "Hi, it's your lawyer. I wanted to check in," he said. "What did you find out?" I asked. He laughed. "It's a little crazy, but when I looked at the evidence in the lawsuit, some of it doesn't seem real. There are outdated bylaws mentioned as a cause and a map that looks doctored," he said. "Are you saying they are lying?" I asked. "Well, I'm just saying this all looks very fishy. I can definitely defend you and you won't pay a dime. But this evidence is so clearly manipulated that I believe if we countersue, this HOA president might really have to pay. We are talking about charges for abuse of power, defamation and harassment," he said. I sighed. I knew these were heavy charges, but in the short time since I met Hank of the HOA, he had made my life hell. Just that morning, my phone had not stopped ringing with calls from people who heard rumors about the lawsuit. Even my son reported that the kids at school were asking if his mom was a thief or a squatter, so I felt well within my rights to serve this fraudulent little man a dose of his own medicine. "I'm in. Let's sue this lying HOA jerk for all he's worth," I said. Over the next few months, the legal proceedings played out in a series of lawyer meetings and court dates. My lawyer was a shark. He refuted every falsified piece of evidence that the disgraced HOA president's lawyers presented. He even brought in a handwriting expert who proved that the old handwritten HOA agreement that was entered into evidence had been tampered with. It all would have felt like an amazing legal show if my financial and personal well-being were not at stake here. The culminating event of the trial was a deposition from Hank of the HOA. My lawyer knew just where to prod to get him to talk, and when he talked, he told a crazy story. It turned out that Hank was deeply in debt and planned to embezzle the spoils of his shakedown into his personal account, thereby leaving me penniless while he would look like the hero of the HOA if he acquired my land for its territory. I knew he was smarmy, but even I was shocked by his confession. It was terrible to watch a man break down, but I felt so much relief knowing that I was the obstacle that brought down a criminal. Hank was charged with forging legal documents with the intent to defraud and forced to pay my legal fees as well as some fines of his own, and he ended up behind bars. No one trusted him anymore. He had to step down as HOA president and could not afford to keep his house after everything. I'd be lying if I said I didn't get a little satisfaction from seeing my town reject him like they did. My family and community would be safer thanks to my ordeal. That might not seem like much of a price, but it is for me. Simple people like me just want to live safely as part of a town that will go down on the right side of history. And yeah guys, I'm so happy for OP because the situation turned out the right way. Getting revenge on such an HOA douchebag must be so satisfying. I'm almost a little bit jealous, but then again, I would rather not deal with such a crazy HOA in my life. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.